Well, good evening, listeners, and welcome to Lament of Hope podcast. I am speaking actually to Louisa John-Krol. She's actually in Australia, so it's morning for her. So wherever you are in the world, morning, evening, hello. Please do subscribe to the podcast if you find it interesting. And it's just been such a gift for me to get to connect to so many different individuals and hear their life stories and what's important to them. Louisa is a musician, but she's also a writer. She's written poetry, she's written stories, and I've listened to some of her ambient music that she's done. There was an album in like 2020 where she did a collaboration with another musician. It was just beautiful, ethereal ambient music. But she also has several CDs and albums of her own that you can find on Spotify. But her music is very ethereal, I would say mystic. Um, it's very otherworldly. So it's not something that it's going to sound like. It's funny because when you look her up on Wikipedia, it says like pop, romantic genre. That's definitely not how I mean, maybe that was just my opinion, but listening to it was much more otherworldly and I think a little deeper than I would say pop or romantic genre. But, Louisa, I do want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Your invitation encouraged me to look into it further, and as you know, it took a little while for us to get around to be together. But I have so far subscribed and watched and listened to somewhere between 5 and 10, and my resonance with them is such. Their resonance with me is such that I've decided to make them part of my daily routine. It's New Year's Eve now, I think, here in Australia, isn't it? My
Yes,
sense of
you're in New
time isn't
Year's
that
Eve
great.
already.
I'm in the timeless zone over here, but I've decided one of my resolutions will be your podcast, The Lament of Hope. Every day I'm going to watch at least one, and if I miss it because something's on, I'll watch two the day after that. Because it's so, what I particularly love about it is that you are full of empathy and curiosity. For someone so young, that's really something. So I support you, and thank you. I feel really grateful that you're open to chatting.
Well, thank you. And that was very kind. You're probably the one person who's told me they do it every day. That's very sweet of you.
No, I mean
Um,
it.
I wanted to ask Louisa because when I was looking at your bio that you have on your website, which is very, very thorough, most people don't tell that much about themselves on their websites, honestly. Um, I mean, you've traveled a lot, you've gone through a lot of things. Um, I know too, near the end, you were talking about you don't do as much music anymore. You do some, but not as much because of a chronic illness that you and your husband have. Um, how has that transition been for you? Because I was looking and like you were touring, you were doing European tours, you were writing tons of music, you were in different bands, and then you've kind of shifted, done some writing, done some poetry.
Mhm.
Um, are you happy with how your life has kind of progressed that way, or is it difficult for you that you're not able to do and be as active with your music as you were before?
There are a lot of different um, aspects of your question that I can unpack. So, to begin with, the illness, it's actually plural, and my husband and I have different illnesses. So in his case, he has post-traumatic stress,
Mm,
and that was due to some incidents that have happened in his life. And so he doesn't travel. The travel that I did do, which admittedly was not nearly as much as what most musicians would do, particularly
yeah.
those who were releasing music on a small label. Um, so I'm really glad that I got to do the travel that I did, and I met some absolutely wonderful people like yourself, just gorgeous. I think that's the best part of it, was just that no matter what culture you were in, you were learning something, and you were collaborating with an artistic, sensitive, thoughtful person. So there was always a lot of learning involved. But to be really clear, even when I didn't know about this illness, um, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But uh, I always found travel hard. I always
Okay.
found the jet lag really knocked me around, and I didn't really feel that comfortable being so high up in the air
Yeah.
and so far away from Mark and from the cats and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's that aspect. On my website, you would have noticed I sometimes use the term fairy bard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, fairy, obviously, we can chat about that when I'm finished answering this question. The bard part is a sort of term of convenience for me. That I know it can sound a little pretentious, but it actually is just a way of saying fairy storytelling, recording, composing, performing music, singing generally, and writing. Writing isn't something that I came to late. It was actually something I have always done alongside the music. So
Hmm.
when you dovetail all of those things, um, my choice would have been to have a whole lot of hyphens, a really, really long description, or just a word, a single word that would pull all those things together, which the word bard actually does.
Okay.
So until I can find a better word, or maybe you need to invent one that means all of those things, that's what that. But as far as adjusting to not performing as much, I still record music. I found this beautiful little studio in Bendigo that I feel very relaxed in. I've actually loved every studio I've worked in. All the producers that I have worked with over the years, none of them are in big studios, none of them are commercial places. They're all private, quiet people with families, with their own quirkiness and eccentricities, and they're all multi-instrumentalists.
Hmm.
And I think all of the people that I've recorded with are also songwriters in their own right, when I think about it. Some of them in different genres, But
Yeah.
yeah, so that has really always been fantastic, and I haven't lost that. And the ones that I can't get to physically, the beauties of technology, you can do a certain amount at home, and then you can send the files to the people that you would normally have gone to, and they can add their things to them, and you can chat on the phone, and like you and I are now, we can talk online. So there's that. The reason that I've stopped being able to go overseas, or indeed, I haven't even for the last year, I haven't even left my town, I think, except I think once with a friend, is because a birth defect basically came to light last December. And I had been unwell and for different things, but yeah, that one just landed me in hospital. And it's a vascular condition. It means that my blood forms these little bubbles, little aneurysms,
Hmm.
um, and it's genetic. So yeah, yeah. The first one ended me in hospital on December and was there for a few nights. But it was actually quite funny because I ended up sharing a room with a truckie, and he was hilarious and it was really, really good medicine. I actually love that phrase, laughter is the best medicine. It's great. And at one point, one of the nurses said, are you sure you're okay? You, she goes, you've got private health cover. Do you want to have your own ward? And I said, well, I feel like I'm being looked after really well here. What do you think? And I said, what's best for you guys? Are you busy? Do you need the bed? And she goes, oh, stay here with us. Because they were laughing as well. It was totally ridiculous because we were completely different people. I had just had this really intense kind of political activist time, and I was all about that. And here's this guy who, just going from what I could glean, his politics were quite different from mine, and yet we were sharing this room with just this curtain in between, and the stories he told me about life on the road of the truckie going between the cities, and the grey nomads, the old people who had been uh, competing with him and stealing the shower caps. So whenever they would go to, you know, have their showers, the truck stops, the pit stops. Yeah, they were just having these trucky wars. Anyway, how did I get onto that? How did I get onto that?
Oh,
So
you were talking about your illness.
we're talking about that. That's right. So had all these tests. They tried to find out what the heck was going on. Was this just a once-off thing? This SCAD, they call it, SCAD, spontaneous coronary artery dissection.
Hmm.
So they found it wasn't just a once-off. I had another aneurysm, didn't I? Because it's older and it's been there in my neck, in
Wow.
my left carotid artery. It's been there for a little while and it's still there. It's about the size of a little pea. It's been growing. And if it bursts like the other one, I'm probably going to just die fairly quickly. Unless I can get to a hospital really super quickly, and then I might have a chance. But it's a bit scary. And
Of
I've
course,
made
because you're
friends with
saying
it.
that's still there, right?
It's still there, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can't operate on it because it's a bit dangerous. At the moment, it's at that stage where it's better to just leave it. But
Yeah.
if it gets too bad, if it keeps growing, then they will have to. Um, so it's scary, but on the other hand, I've made friends with it. It's called Pearly. It's like Little Pearl, and I see it as a creative friend. It's a companion because it's basically saying to me, your role is not to travel and perform. Your role in this life is to read and write, and something I've always loved doing. Um, so frankly, I don't think I was that great a performer, but I think I'm a much greater writer. And even if I'm not, there's a reason for everything. So I'm at peace with that. I'm home with my cats, got my books, my music, my garden, my husband, and um, people like you to chat to online. So yeah, I'm
How
okay
did
with
it
that
how did it
moment.
feel when you first heard that though? Because I know for me, like I would have
Mm,
freaked out. I really would have.
yes, yeah. Would you have freaked out because you're still so young with so much of your life ahead of you? And you're in your 20s. I'm 58. So was it that? Or do you think that you would freak out just because it's scary?
I
Death
think
is,
I'd freak out because I wouldn't have control. It would be like I could be anywhere and then it would be it. Like I wouldn't be able to prepare or
yep.
mentally, like I could just be, and also as you would need to limit your life in some ways just to kind of, I
Mm,
mean, I think about decreasing the trauma for my husband. Like, do I want to be in
yep.
certain place so that if it did happen, he
Yes.
wasn't affected to the point where it caused damage. Like, I would think more of like, I think it's the controlledness that I don't have that would scare me.
Yeah, no, that's a really wise and insightful comment. That's part of it for sure. I
Yeah,
think we all like to imagine the ideal death as being like what we would give to our cats, because our greatest gift that we can give to our our beloved companions is a merciful death. When they've got a terrible condition, to be able to call the vet and you plan, you go through the
yeah.
rituals, you sing them those last lullabies, the last embrace, all of those things, and they're with you, they're on your knee, you've got the peaceful ambient music or something playing, or you're singing to them, and it's just everything is that last time that is a gift you can give to them because you're sparing them from a horrible death. And then, I can remember burying them with my own hands and just, I haven't had children, but I can imagine um, partly what it would be like to bury a child. And you're scraping the earth literally under your hands, and you're just feeling that utter loss. It's really, really, really difficult. Death is hard. It's really hard being mortal, I think, and confronting the mortality and change of things around you. But one thing I can say to that is that I think the pressures that we have from capitalism and commercialism is that everything we're expected to be perfect, the perfect housework, the perfect
Mm.
body,
Yeah.
perfect skin, perfect. whatever it is, off to the gym, off to the, another trip, another travel, everything, the best cars, people are just so competitive, and there's people can't, nothing in life really is able to be captured and controlled like that. There's always going to be something that's decaying, something that's not quite what you were hoping for.
Yeah.
Um, that's just what it's about, to be here. And I don't know why. Maybe it's something consciousness is just having to learn. But if you can let go of that need to pin it all down and make it all perfect, if you just go, okay, I can control some things, but I can't control all of it. I just have to go with the flow. And yeah, so I love, there's a really beautiful Buddhist saying. I'm not Buddhist, but I love dabbling in different forms of wisdom, and I love reading other people's views. And one Buddhist idea that I really love is happiness is not getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. And
Mm.
I put that as gratitude, you know,
Yeah.
to actually look around you and say, well, thank goodness I'm not in Ukraine right now. I'm not in Syria. I'm not happy that somebody else is going through that. But I am happy that I'm not.
Yeah.
So imagine if you had the kind of condition that I've got or some other chronic condition and you're in a war zone on top of it. And
Yeah.
that happens to people. So yeah, there's a lot of ways you can think to get around that issue. But thank you for asking.
So you came to peace with it with kind of just, like you said, becoming less um, concerned about the control or how, or is that like maybe for you, like just a daily thing you have to do? Because I'm sure, does the fear come back for you in moments and you kind of just have to take a deep breath and think again, kind of thing?
Well, breathing is important anyway. Yeah, breathing
Oh,
is
yeah.
really good for singers, but also, yes, for anxiety. It's very good for that. Um, and breath in the Welsh tradition, which I've just been reading about, this gorgeous book, Welsh Fairies, by this, Mark bought me this as a surprise. Um, Apparently, Awen, Awen, Awen is breath of inspiration. It is a breath, and it comes from the other world. And I love that idea. I love the idea that God or gods, whatever you call the divinities, is it's like a breath. It's all around us. It's in the trees and it's in the smallest little details. Um, so yeah, breathing's good, and also just physically. As I'm sure you would have heard this, and anyone with anxiety who's had help with anxiety probably would know this, but if you don't, I'll share it. This very basic thing is that oxygen doesn't get along with adrenaline.
Yeah.
Um, they cancel each other out. So basically, if you're breathing deeply and calmly, it can actually it can knock away the stress, the anxiety. So yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Mm.
How has your husband taken it? Like, is he at peace with it as well, or is it hard for him?
He's pretty stoic. He's not what you would call a spoilt brat, sulky sort of person. He's not someone who goes through life thinking everything has to be the way he wants it. Possibly because he came from a country that suffered so much in recent history. I think it's a bit different from my lot, because I think the Anglo-Celts, we sure had a lot of suffering, but not in recent times, not to the extent of somewhere like Poland, where they had they had the Nazis on one side, and the communists on the other. So they had extreme right wing and extreme left wing, and they just were crashing in on them. And yeah, they've just had a lot of horror. They're not far from Ukraine, and well, right next door. And so the Bloodlands, a lot of suffering there. And I think my experience has been that sometimes when people come from intergenerational trauma of that scale, when so many millions of their people have died, I think they do have a slightly less sport brat view of the universe.
Yeah.
I tend to just think, well, gee, I didn't think I'd live this long. Here I am. Oh, here you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's make the best of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you don't have to answer this, let me know, but for the PTSD he experienced, is that in part because of Poland and his own experiences in his
No, it was
country?
more recent. I mean, obviously, those things would play into, we all have kind of the intergenerational stuff, and then we have who knows what past life things go on, if that's a thing. But then there's childhood bullying people can have. But in his case, he had a breakdown. It was a complete mental collapse because of some violence that was happening in his job. He was actually working as a teacher in one of the roughest urban regions of Australia, on
Wow.
the urban fringe, and yeah, so he was physically attacked, and he was a great teacher, brilliant, compassionate as well as intellectually astute. So he was really cultivated, but he was also like you, a lot of empathy, which is quite a rare combination, I think. And he did do really well with a lot of rough kids. He did get them through. And I know this, I keep finding letters and emails and cards and gifts from people that came to him over those 20 years. I've kept them for him. And sometimes, he would be out shopping and we'd bump into some child that he had taught, and they'd be like, Mr. Kroll, Mr. Kroll, and I taught for a little while as well out there. I taught for about 10 years alongside the music and fairy storytelling. And when I was out there, I can remember using his name to win some of the rough kids over. All I had to do was just, he was so well known in the region, all I had to do was kind of, name drop, which I didn't have to do because, the name, Mrs. Kroll, I was to them. And, oh, are you Mr. Kroll's wife? And that was all I had to do was, yeah, Mr. Kroll. Whoa. But he's human and there's only so much. And, there were some kids who were just are just so far gone. They've had such traumatized lives, or they're so far away from trust that they sap every bit of energy you have, and you have a few of those in a classroom, and they're bouncing off the walls. And um, yeah, and I remember he actually saved the life of a child. So a kid was being attacked by like a racist lynch mob. Kid ducked behind him, and you know, he was beaten instead of the child. But that's the kind of person he was. He wouldn't just slink away and hide. When you're a teacher, you do
Hmm.
develop survival tactics, but he didn't. He would, if he saw someone who was in trouble, he would help. Anyway, yeah. So post-traumatic stress, it's a real thing, and
That's incredible,
he lost
though. I mean, what
vocabulary.
a brave man.
Yeah, he is brave. And
Yeah.
he lost for a while. He actually didn't have vocabulary. He lost his ability to read, which is like his main passion is his reading. He's got that back. He's got the focus back now. He can read.
Was that like a
Highly.
brain injury, or was that just part of the trauma that he couldn't read?
Trauma. Yeah, it was
Wow.
trauma. Yeah, it was
Wow.
not a good question. Yeah, I actually do know someone who's had a physical brain injury as well as trauma. Um, but his was actually yeah, psychological trauma. Um, but
That must have been
yes,
so hard for you as his wife. Because, as you said, like, then he changed. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. It's like the
mm,
personality of the person or whatever they're going through at the time.
mm,
You need to fall in love again in some ways with a different type of person.
yeah. Also, I think loving another person is a bit like reading a really good book. It takes you away from your ego. It's actually a relief to look after somebody else who is in trouble
Hmm.
because you don't have to think about all the things that you have struggled with.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can actually look out, same with, looking after as with your Am I allowed to say the name of your cat?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Nightly.
Mr. I know that you know what I mean about cats, but I think
Oh
it's like that
yes.
people, when you are so into loving them, you stop worrying about your own crap.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
It's not the big problem. But that kind of also helps to answer the question you asked me earlier about traveling. And yeah, I wouldn't want to travel away. I wouldn't want to be away from him, put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? Why do you love storytelling so much? Because I don't think I've come across an artist. I mean, all artists usually will say, to a degree, like they tell stories, right, about their life or about
Yeah.
their experiences. But you seem to, from your work and from what I was reading, you just seem to love story itself, specifically the fairy world and the supernatural, and you
Mhm.
love exploring that, and you love kind of being a vessel for that in what you do. Um, like why is that? What kind of inspired that deep love for story itself? Just kind of not even really about yourself, but just story in general.
The love for the fairy people, um, belief in tree spirits. Um, and on that note, I would like to say what I really had meant to say earlier in this chat is that in here in Bendigo, which is where I was born, we are actually on the traditional lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people and the Indigenous people of Australia. Certainly hundreds of different groups and languages,
Hmm.
but certainly have similar beliefs. And I'm not trying to conflate them. I'm trying to say, hey, yours is the same as mine or anything like that. They're all distinct. But I do feel very comfortable with animism, with the my Druidic ancestors, and also the Greco-Roman mythology. I remember reading the Narnia books and I know that they have a strong Christian undertone, of course, with Aslan and his death and his resurrection. But they also had the nymphs and the dryads,
Oh
and
yeah.
there was all that. So I had that, and I brought with me. This is one of the books I love. This is one of the more recent ones of Brian Froud. I loved Brian Froud's fairy books, and this one was actually associated with some music of mine that I did. So I actually met him, and he did a little video for one of my songs. Um, but with the fairy people, the storytelling, um, I think it kind of, for me, it links the sensual world to the spiritual world, and it's also a little bit like the Sufi idea. The Marsilio Ficino, who lived in the Renaissance, he was a friend of my favorite painter, um, Botticelli. He had this idea that the soulfulness, the soul is moving. I think it's called idolum, where you don't stay too long in the intellect, you don't stay too long in the emotions, you don't stay too long in the body. You are moving between them, and so you've got spiritual parts of your consciousness. Um, but and you've got the sensual love of life, the body. But people who spend all their time in the gym just thinking about their body or just doing facelifts or whatever, um, they're missing out on all these other parts of their humanity.
Yeah.
Um, and people who spend all their time in their emotions and never reading and expanding their intellect, all of us, we can become a bit melodramatic, a bit sentimental, a bit kind of self-indulgent. Um,
That's
and if
true.
you spend all your time in the intellect, you can just become a bit too crusty and maybe a bit nihilistic and cynical and cold. So I think it's good to be able to move between all those states is really healthy for an artist I think also it's really healthy for a soul. And I think fairy storytelling was one kind of doorway into that. But Dad used to sit us on his knee and tell us stories of Robin Hood. And I think that was kind of a little bit of a gateway for me as well, because they were quite funny. He was very naughty, he was a real rascal, my dad. And yeah, also I think Robin Hood linked a little bit to Robin Goodfellow, Puck,
Mm-hmm.
the Guardian of the Forest, Jack in the Green. So there was a bit of that. Um, yeah, but I actually fell into fairy storytelling by accident. And I'm going to just tell you this briefly. I'm checking. You wind me up if I'm talking too much. But I was working in a fairy shop just behind the counter in my 20s, and we all would wear garlands and very very pre-Raphaelite. I loved it there, and I loved the people there and everything, the rose fragrance and there's a giant Pegasus and the little sparkles. It was fantastic. But I was really hopeless at the job because I'm not very good with numbers. And I also smashed a few things when I was wrapping them up because I'm very clumsy. That's another reason why I'm not good at performing, by the way, tripping over things. Anyway, I ended up getting the sack and I threw myself on the bed and I was crying my heart out because I just loved that job so much. But then the lady who ran the fairy shop came along as a guest to a play, little dramatic production that some of us were doing, and we were the singing bells. I was one of the singing bells of Notre Dame. I think it was based on Victor Hugo's novel.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was one of the singing bells. And after the show, she came up to me and she said, "Louisa, I want you to come to my fairy shop as a storyteller. Don't work behind the counter. Come into the magic room and you can be one of our fairy storytellers and you can sing." And so the stories were sung as well. But it meant that I had mentorship because she goes, "And I want you to learn how to tell stories from my friend Nell Bell." Now, it only hit me just the other day. I was thinking about this, the bells, the singing bells. And the name of the mentor was Nell Bell. And
Wow.
she was this old lady. I mean, how she was this old lady, and she gave me so much advice about fairy storytelling. The most important thing that she gave to me was what not to do, especially with children, but actually with all ages. People used to come up to me and ask me for a wish, and I'd be working at carnivals, festivals and stuff, because this kind of went on from the shop to other things. And so I'd be floating around in a festival dressed as a fairy, doing it. People would come up, including adults, and they would say, "Can you grant me a wish?" Well, Nell Bell always told me you never, never play those games with people. You don't manipulate their emotions and you don't make promises you can't deliver. Because
Hmm.
what if you had a child come to you, "Mum's dying of cancer. Can you save my mum?" This kind of thing. Can you bring this person back who died or whatever the wish is? So the what we would do is we would say something like, let's make a wish together. I wish that we can do something kind every day in our life. Something like that. Something that you're not promising that it's going to happen, and you're not stoking the wishful thinking of greed.
Hmm.
When you think about the wishing well, the well women, well wishing, wish you well. The wishing well women, they're the muses, they're the fairies, the graces. They don't always give you what you want, but they are ethereal beings. You can learn from them sometimes, and they can make offerings of magic. But yeah, it's like the Rolling Stones song. You don't always get what you want, you sometimes get what you need. But that was the advice I had from that beautiful old fairy storyteller. It's
Well, I
very,
was
very
gonna
good.
ask because a fairy storyteller would be different, right, than an actual fairy. Like when you're talking about the fairies that would offer sacrifices or things like that, they would have the power to do something, whereas you kind of recognize I'm a storyteller. I'm not able
Yeah,
to do the same thing. But people
Yeah.
would assume you could based on how you looked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And sometimes I didn't wear wings. I would wear the garland,
Yeah.
which I still do sometimes anyway. But the wings, well, the wings are a bit awkward. You know, when you're clumsy like me, you're bumping into things all the time. I've got very poor peripheral vision. That's another birth defect of mine, actually. Didn't find this one till later, was that I have really poor peripheral vision. I'm virtually peripherally blind, which is maybe why I saw fairies as a child. If if you would look at it from a completely medical point of view, maybe they were little, maybe I was just seeing shadows, in the peripheral. And I thought they were fairies, but no, I'm being naughty. Yeah, the fairies I always believed in, and they're liminal creatures. They're betwixt and between, they live in the twilight, they live in the dawn, they live in the crossroads of life, and they live in the periphery. They're neither, I see the fairy people as, I suppose, a little bit like angels or genies.
Hmm.
Um, they're not necessarily tiny, they can be of any size, they're quite diverse according to what culture you're in. Um, but yeah, they're pretty much my main obsession in life.
Now,
Mm.
if you want to communicate with a fairy, do you offer a sacrifice to them or how do you connect?
No. Um, how do I connect? I think it's like communing with something. I will sometimes just listen, and I will pick up what the little message might be. Like I've got these little chimes. There are ways you can open your door, your mind door. So how slow we grow, how slow we go. Just sort of little playful things. Um, Little incantations, like I made one up. It goes, Limber days of dulcet cheer, bring the grace of fairies near, and thank ye hobs already here, especially those who hold us dear. It's just a little thing, and then the fairies know that you're thinking of them. Yeah.
Your singing was beautiful, even just in that little chant you gave.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
Yeah. Hadn't warmed up. I was listening to your podcast all night practically, so yeah. But
I, that's not how I sound when I haven't warmed up, I'll tell you. Um, you know, it's it's interesting to me because I think, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but you know, I think I think you did watch the interview with Juliet Marillier, and she was talking about the orders. Um, is that when she was talking about that, is that also something where are you part of an order, like a bard order, similar to her, or is that a completely different thing?
it's similar, but I'm
Okay.
not part of an order. I know the
Okay.
one you mean, and I did watch that, and I loved it. Um, I do have a close friend called Riley McGarren, who is a harpist, and she's part of, I think it might be the same order that Juliet's in. I have read Juliet's book. I've got several of her books. I've read Shadowfell, and actually Juliet endorsed a book that I co-edited, South of the Sun, Australian Fairy Tales for the 21st Century. She endorsed that. Very, very honored about it. But yes, there are some, every belief that she unpacked with you about her thing is mine. Yes, they overlap.
Yeah.
Um, but I've never been a member of any kind of coven or, a formal structure. Some would call me a solitary hedge witch. I do use the word pagan or heathen quite sort of happily. Pagan does have some scary connotations to some people, I know, but it actually just the Latin is pagani is the plural, paganus is the singular, and it's just the pre-Christian peasants of the countryside. It's a rustic thing. It's
Right.
just a way of referring to people who were pre-Christian. And I'm certainly not anti-Christian. For me, in the pantheon of gods and goddesses that I feel an affinity with, um, Jesus Christ is one of them. I can't think of any. I've never encountered any other deity who represents compassion and mercy in the way that Jesus Christ does. So I would never put down that presence in people's lives. When it's genuine, when it's authentic, that's great, you know. But I do feel that there are others in my life that have guided me. So, for example, with the cats, I'm guided by Artemis, who her Greek Greek name is Diana. Um, the Roman is Artemis, and she's very much protector of wild creatures.
Hmm.
So, as much as I love our indoor cats, they do not go outside. Absolutely not one little tibbly toe outdoors. They have a cat park outside that connects with the windows through cat flaps in the glass. And they have playgrounds inside above the bookcases. And we use salvaged fretwork wood timber to create balconies for them. So
Oh, great.
all of these things, you know, it's a very physical, tangible, daily practice is to keep these little creatures happy inside so that the other creatures outside, the little native beings, are safe. You know, so
Oh, so it's
that's
more to
very
protect the animals
tangible.
outside than the
Yeah, so
cat. Okay.
it's protecting the cats from other predators, but it's also protecting the native animals in Australia who are being decimated by cats. You
Hmm.
know, they didn't evolve with cats. So that is an example of just how that particular being helps me in my life. Um, oh gosh, I could go on if we got time. I could tell you about a couple of the others that I relate to in the pantheon that help me in my daily life. Um,
How
if you
about
want me
when
to.
you feel um when you're very angry at
Mhm.
someone and you don't want to become bitter towards them? What kind of
Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, so it depends on the situation. If it's not a person-specific anger, if it's just sort of like a general feeling of annoyance that I didn't get something I wanted. Like let's say, okay, a few months ago I entered a poem in a competition that I thought was a really great poem. Still think it's great. Didn't win. Someone else won. Someone else's turn. The God who spoke to me and calmed my temper tantrum, which was like half a minute long. It wasn't even temper tantrum, just like a, you know. But that relationship was Hermes, or also known as Mercury, who is a very contradictory, interesting god who is involved with communication, but also with secrecy, discretion, hiding, but also with guiding. Very interesting book I recommend on Hermes, Guide of Souls. His attitude is, you want to play the game of life, you're going to lose sometimes. And that's all right. Because if I'm playing let's say, a board game with friends, relatives, and you roll the dice or whatever, and it's not going your way, what I'm going to do? Throw a tantrum? No. I'm just going to go, well, it didn't work the way I wanted it to. I'm playing the game of life. I know it's going to hurt sometimes. That's why I'm here. I didn't come into a perfect world. Um, Now, that doesn't always work. If someone has done something really cruel, something really horrible to you, then I don't think that would necessarily be the deity that you would. I mean, if you're talking about social justice in a more political, general way, then it would be Athena. I'd be thinking of, that kind of strong, let's get this sorted out. We're not going to have people homeless in our streets. No, that sort of social justice, democracy, um, yeah, that kind of thing. That's more Athena's territory. So it's like different aspects of the psyche. Um,
And do
But
you
forgive
just
one.
ask, like you say their name and ask for the help? Or is it just
Yeah.
something you hear kind of internally in your in
It's more thinking about them and what they
I
mean.
see. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not so much a voice coming at me from, hey. I might say their name, but I think it's more just the longer I live, the easier it becomes to just kind of lean into to a way of thinking that can help.
I
Like with
see.
creative
Okay.
block, creative. I would go to say Mnemosyne, who's the goddess of the muses, mother of the muses, goddess of memory, or Ceridwen, the Welsh goddess of inspiration and the underworld, the other world. Um, but yeah, anger can sometimes be a good thing. It can be an energy if it is protecting people that you love.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, You know what I mean? You sometimes do need to have a little bit of a
Yes. Yeah.
fighty spirit. But there are also times when you can forgive it. I really liked, in that book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa.
Hmm.
So the one I mean, very well loved book. Um, I can't tell you how many friends gave that book to me, and I kept thinking, oh no, it's too popular. I'm not reading that. It's not esoteric enough, which was just so arrogant. And finally, I got over myself and I read it and I loved it. And one of the things she said was, you don't have to forgive all at once. You don't even have to forgive ever or entirely. You forgive in portions as you're ready. You might forgive a bit one year, forgive a bit the next, and the one after that, and then you might fall back a little bit. You might have something happen that sort of throws you back, and you take a few steps back, and you go, look, I thought I'd forgiven, but I haven't completely.
Hmm.
But that's okay. You forgive if something terrible has happened to you. You can you don't have to be the perfect angelic, positive thinking all the time. It's all right to harbor a bit of grief, a bit of anger, fear, because that's all part of our soul, isn't it? It's part of consciousness.
Well, because you do have to admit you've been hurt, you know. So to say you haven't isn't true. And so, yeah, and I mean, even like going back to your husband, even for a second, I mean, what happened to him was wrong. And so it would be strange if he just said, that doesn't matter, you know, people can hurt me, and that I've met people who say, you know, people, words don't matter, and I'm not really hurt, and nothing really bothers me. And I'm like, that can't be possible, though, you know, like you have to feel something, you know, whether
Yes.
it's sadness or anger or I mean, I even think if you don't care, that speaks to why don't you care? You know, is it too hard to care? You know,
Yeah.
there's you know, when you're human, you feel a lot of things, like you said, kind of as you're switching, you know, you have your physical side, you have your spiritual side, you have these emotions, and it's not good to dwell in one too long because, like you said, with emotions, they can be bad, right? You get too angry, then you can do something wrong, you know? Um, but I find that interesting that you said forgiveness. I think especially when you were talking about PTSD with your husband, forgiveness is not something that happens right away.
Mm.
It is a
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
for sure.
And as one of your guests said in one of your shows, sometimes you do just have to remove yourself from a situation that's never going to be good, or even if that person has apologized, and even if that person has changed, part of you will never completely trust them again.
That's true,
And
yeah.
the same can go for workplace bullying or, any other violence. When a trust is broken, it's very hard to regain it. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you have to go around, carrying a vendetta for the rest of your life either. But yes, post-traumatic stress um, that can happen with trauma. It's a sort of body's memory, isn't it? It's the body's way of protecting you. It's all this the symptoms will come back. The perspiration, the shaking, um, the head spinning. There's a sensation of the spinning in the head, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah, I know, because I get anxiety as well. So I'm sort of partly on the way to that. Yeah, I can understand where he's coming from. But also when you live with someone, you do learn the triggers as well.
Yeah. because you're a
It's
means of
very important.
support. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you learn also, from the teaching experience and working as a fairy storyteller with people as well. You learn things like if someone is really distressed and upset and angry about something, it might have nothing to do with you, but it is, you're aware of this happening. That one of the things you can do is just slow your voice down. The pace becomes slower, lower your voice, drop the tone, all of those things. Whereas if you accelerate and, kind of rise with it, just makes it worse. So I think, yeah, there's ways around all that.
Well, I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. I wanted to ask you, though, it was something you said earlier when you were saying you sing lullabies to your cat when they pass away. I would
Yeah.
love to do that. I hate to think about it. I have to be honest, because it's my first cat and I love him to
Oh,
death. And so I know it will
yeah.
happen, but I don't like thinking about it. But
Yeah.
can you sing one of those lullabies?
Sure. Yeah. I hope I don't start crying, but yeah, this is one of the ones that I would sing to Jin. Um, okay. Ginny, oh Ginny, you're waiting by the almond tree. I wish you happy rustling years, dancing your smile around the leaves. You're deeper than the wild black sea, with genie eyes of golden green. Now dive into the dusky eve. Ginny, oh, Ginny, Gin. Catechins, catechins, kitty cat paws by the walnut tree. Ginny Gin, Gin. Little green bells by the crackling bean. And things may come, and they may be. For the dear, beautiful bonny Ginny, Gin. Down the chimney, 1, 2, 3, blows a burly storm, and me. I love you, Ginny, and things may come, and they may be, for the dear, beautiful bonny Ginny, Gin. Little black fairy, come to me, wild pantherina, Burmese queen, Gin, Gin, Gin.
Mm. And you would sing that to him while he was dying? That's so soothing. You're gonna make me cry.
I don't know if she was Burmese or not. She was a rescued girl, but she was like a brick wrapped in silk. And yeah, I don't know if you can, that's her, it's my baby, Jin. It's cute. Oh,
Well, Louisa, it was such a gift to talk with you. Thank you so
it's
much
lovely.
for it and for your beautiful voice. And I loved getting to hear your story, and I love that you love cats just as much as I do. And I think I'm gonna, when my cat passes away, I think I might take up your tradition.
Yeah, sing a little lullaby. Yeah. It's been wonderful being with you.
You as
And
well.
you're going to be part of my day for the next foreseeable future, aren't you? Because I'm going to be catching up on all your shows.
And you'll eventually see your own, and you'll have to listen to your voice and listen to your
Oh
responses.
dear. Time for a cup of tea or coffee there, I think.
All right, Louisa. Well, you have a very good morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye, Danielle.
Bye.